Good morning, class. We're now going to work on the last part of the form assignment, the drawings. We've already built our model. We've photographed the model. You've sent me the photograph of your model, and we've met and reviewed the geometry of the shadows that you're going to be drafting and drawing. And you've reviewed the PowerPoint that goes through this process as well. And so today I'm just going to show you some of the techniques. I'm going to repeat a bit on the process for drafting the geometries, and then I'm also going to show you techniques for putting down the smooth tones, especially the gray tones. All right, so as you can see, I've drafted up my design. I'm just putting the fewest lines down that I can, and but getting the basic geometry of the shapes that are in my model and that are in my diagram. And so I'm going to start again in this area that I worked on in the model, just as a way to illustrate the process. And I can start in any number of places. I do want to lay out the constructed shadows using my tools. Now, I don't have a drafting pencil at home, so I'm using a drawing pencil, but I would normally use a drafting pencil for this work. I also don't have an architect scale, so I'm using my ruler, but that works fine in this case. So as an example, I'm going to deal with the diagonal line that's right here. I have this little pie shape. Let's see if I can zoom in a little. All right, so I'm going to be dealing with this pie shape. This pie shape is 1/4 inch higher than the rest of the circle surface. So the line, this is the edge that's going to cast the shadow. It's going to cast it down, and it's going to be the same shape that it is, because going way back to Barcelona, parallel line, parallel surface, parallel shadow, our rule of parallels. And the distance it's going to move from its origin is the height difference. So in this case, that's 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to take a point, measure along a vertical line, 1/4 inch, and then draft that line. Right? So the shape of the shadow is going to be this surface. Right, that kind of rectangle. I'm not going to shade that in right now. Normally I wouldn't even put in these slashes other than for you to see it, because I have other shadow shapes that are going to interact with that one. And I want to get the full outline before I start darkening any of it in. Otherwise, what I darken in will be in the way and I won't be able to see clearly what I'm doing. Okay, the other shapes that are going to be interacting with this one are the shadows of the ring. And so I have this top ring, and it's 1/4 inch higher than this surface and 1/2 inch higher than this surface. And it is just this top quarter circle. All right, so I'm going to look at that. Now, similarly to my diagonal, the shape of the shadow is going to be the same shape as the edge casting the shadow, which in this case is this arc. Okay? Has the same radius. What's going to move is the center point. So first I'm going to just use my drawing to measure the radius. I'm going to set it into the original center point and just adjust my compass until I have the correct radius. All right, so that's ready. Now, I'm going to end up shifting that center point twice. Once for where the shadow of this edge lands on the upper little pie shape, and then again for where it lands on the lower portion of the circle. So I'm going, I already have that 1/4 inch point that I used before. That's the same one I'm going to need now. And then I'm going to measure the second 1/4 inch. So I've got that ready. And now I can draft those arcs. All right, so first I shift it down to the first one, and where I'm on that upper surface, that's where that arc is. Then I shift it down again, and where I'm on the lower surface, that's where that arc is. So now you see I have 3 shapes that are going to be defining that shadow. Now I can go ahead and darken them in. And I'm going to use a soft drawing pencil. You can use your ebony pencil, you can use a 6B pencil, whatever you like. You want to start with a sharp point so that you can get really precise edges, and then you want to just fill it in really solid. So I'll do that and then come back. All right, class, as you can see, I've darkened in some of the shadows. I've drafted out the shadows cast by the arcs. I outline them first and then come back in and fill them in really dark and black. Getting them all drawn out ahead of time rather than going one by one is helpful for a couple of reasons. One, it allows me to work in an orderly manner so I can keep my hand off of the areas that I've already darkened in so I don't smear it. It also makes it easier because some areas that might otherwise be kind of picky because they're small and precise turn out to not matter because they're adjacent to another one. Now, when I do need to put my hand where I've already darkened it, shaded it, I put something underneath it. In this case, I just have a piece of flimsy handy. And it's a little tedious. I have to kind of look at it from the side to make sure I've got everything blackened in well. I give myself these borders to try and make sure I stay inside the lines. But when I don't, I use my eraser shield to clean up any edges that I've messed up. And I have to kind of turn my head to the side a bit to really see if I've gotten good coverage on my tone. You may not have the same problem. Maybe it's got to do with my old eyes versus your young eyes. But then where I've made a couple of little glitches, I'll come back with my eraser shield and just clean that up. Put that down here. All right, so now I've got some pretty good crisp lines. And I haven't drawn in all of the shadows, but I've given you a fair amount of them so you can get a sense of what this is going to look like. All right, now I want to illustrate how to handle the gray tones. And the diamond that is here is a gray tone. It's going to slope from a high point here to a low point here. So it's going to be a uniform gray tone. It's going to just be a single flat color. The first thing I'm going to do now is actually tape down my my flimsy over the work that I've done so that I don't make a mess of it and don't smear it. I'm going to tear it into some smaller pieces so it's more convenient. And so I'm going to put one like this, because this very black, it smudges so easily, and it just makes my entire drawing dirty and you know, not what I want. So I just mask the areas that I want to protect. If I wasn't going to be working right adjacent to it, I would cover the whole thing with just a bigger piece. But since I am working adjacent, I need to make sure I keep the area that I want to be drawing in clear. So I'm getting these protective layers down pretty securely. All right, now the process I use for this is different. I'm going to start with a hard lead. All right, in this case I've got a 4H, and I'm going to lay a universal tone down on this. All right, just smooth and even, but very, very light. There's something about getting the graphite down on the whole surface that that makes a difference. So you can see it's barely visible. I'm going up to the edge, and by working from the edge, I can pretty confidently and consistently put my pencil down right on the line, not going over it, and then just pulling to a comfortable distance. And that will give me a really nice crisp edge. Okay. Then I'll come parallel along this edge, parallel along this edge. The bottom edge I don't have to worry about because I've got that heavy black, and so I can spill into it without having any impact. All right, so now that I've got my perimeters established, I can get that tone in fairly quickly. Okay, now I want to keep this pretty uniform, but it's not going to be perfect yet, and that's certainly nowhere near done yet. All right, so I'm starting with the hard lead. This is a lot lighter than my ultimate gray tone is going to be. All right, so now you can make that out more or less. Now I come back with a little bit softer lead, in this case a 2H, and I'm going to change my angles, always keeping it something that I'm comfortable with, and repeat that process. All right, and then I'm going to go through this with progressively softer leads until I'm reached the value that I'm looking for, the darkness that I'm looking for, and each one is going to gradually smooth out and even out the tones. If I need to, when I get towards the end, I can come back with some of my harder leads to further even it up. All right, so I've gone over my diamond there with just a couple of pencils in this case. I just used the 4H and then the 2H, though the 2H I went over really 3 times, doing it first vertically, then diagonally, and then horizontally. And so by doing that, I'm able to, with the pencil, essentially blend the strokes and get a very uniform value and even tone for that. I'm going to pull off my mask so you can see it a little better, because I'm going to move them again and do another demonstration for another technique. All right, so you can see now how this is coming together and how the design is really transforming from, you know, what had been modeled. You know, now we know this is an incomplete model, but nonetheless modeled, to how it's going to appear with the tonal values. Right. Now, the last thing I'm going to demonstrate is for a curved surface. And this would be similar whether it was a cylindrical surface, right, like a tube, or a sphere or cup. Any kind of rounded surface is going to have this, this basic technique. And in this case, what I'm going to be drawing is if this bottom rectangle here, was a quarter of a cylinder, right? So this would be the top edge, and then it would round down to here. This would be joining at a horizontal, and it would round down to 0 here. So it's curving like this way. Like a quarter arc that way. All right. So again, I'm going to protect my work. And in this case, the top edge, where it's horizontal, is white. So I can come right up to the edge of where I'm going to be, fresh piece, be drawing on the top. On the left and right, though, I'm going to need to give myself just a little bit of room. The right, I don't have anything that I need to worry about. The left, I'm going to be a little outside my my boundary, but it's a very, very similar strategy and technique to what I was just doing. Now, the issue here is that I'm going to have a gradated surface, right? It's going to start white and get to black. And so it's going to be white up here at the top and black down here on the bottom. All right, and so the process I'm going to use, I'm going to begin with my hard lead, covering the entire surface very, 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 very lightly. That is not my hard lead. This is my hard lead. Very, very, very lightly, even lighter than I did before. So I'm just using what is very comfortable in terms of the angle. But you can barely see it. I can barely see it. Right? And I'm keeping a horizontal edge up at the top, just a little ways from the edge of this rectangle that's representing the tube. Okay. Being careful with my bottom edge. This isn't that big a deal because I also know this bottom edge being the boundary of my entire design, I can easily clean up with my eraser shield. Now I'm going to come back still with my hard lead, still with my 4H, changing my angle. And so I'm going to physically move my body and go not quite as far. Right? So I'm going to start a little bit lower on the rectangle and then come back and repeat that process. Right, and then fill up the entire surface. I'm going to keep doing this, coming in this case because my gradations are essentially horizontal patterns. You know, they're going to develop along that horizontal axis. I'm just going to keep coming back with softer and softer leads and covering less and less of the surface. All right, and then just continually changing the alignment of my pattern until I get that worked out. Okay, so you can see I've built up that gradation of tone so that it goes from light to dark. And now I'll move my mask so you can see it a little better. It's fairly uniform. I touch it up at the end with my hard lead, my 4H, going across everything. And that helps blend. It gets a little stripy. And this helps blend those boundaries. Okay, so that's it. That's all of the techniques for the drawings, and I think you're ready to go. See you soon.